Okay. What was her name? Michelle McCusker was her name, and she was in her late 20s. She was a math teacher, as Julie Brown had said. And what was it that happened with Michelle McCusker?
She got pregnant, and she told the principal, and the principal told her if she got married, didn't even have to be to the father, she could keep her job. Then they fired her, and then she sued, saying that it was discrimination against women, and the court ruled that...
What was the school's argument for firing her? What did she do or not do?
She didn't uphold the Catholic core values.
She didn't uphold the core teachings of the Catholic Church, which was actually in the contract that she signed. So if you go back and you look at this, Michelle McCusker was a Catholic school teacher. Just like you had said, she had gotten pregnant out of wedlock. For a while, she kept it quiet. She eventually told the principal. The principal basically gave her an ultimatum. You can keep your job if you marry somebody. So I think the principal's trying to give her a fair shake. However, if you don't, and actually the principal made it sound like it was going to be okay at first. A couple of days later, the principal did fire her. The principal said, you violated the contract, you didn't uphold core teachings of the Catholic faith. She said, you're firing me because I'm a woman. You're firing me and this is discrimination. What was her argument?
That men can have sex without getting pregnant, and so they get to keep their jobs even if they're having unprotected sex.
And women?
Women. But the court's thing was like, it's not discrimination because not all women, like women don't always get pregnant.
Okay, yeah, that's true. But what about the women part? You said that men, it's discrimination because men are going to be able to do this and you're not going to know.
Yeah.
What was the argument as far as why she thought it was discrimination?
Women can't hide it.
Women can't hide it. Yeah, men can't get pregnant, women can. So there were two arguments that the court gave when they upheld her firing. What was it? What was the obvious one? When the school said you violated the contract, how'd the court answer it?
Yeah, you did.
They said, yeah, you did violate. You agreed to this. You violated to the contract, and in fact, it is legal for you to be fired. And regarding her discrimination, you had said it, and you actually said the harder one first, which is not all women who have sex out of wedlock get pregnant. In this instance, there would be men and women that might be violating this rule, and they would be violating it with equal impunity because we don't know. But in this case, not only were you going to show, but you told us that you were pregnant, and as such, you violated the contract. We had to fire you at that point. If a man came in, and several people mentioned this, and had admitted to this, then the man would have been fired too. But the men haven't evidently been admitting that. Sex shop patrons, do you remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
What was sex shop patrons?
Take pictures of license plates.
What about the church?
The church that was.
Zoom in on her. Go ahead. What was the church?
No, okay. I respect your privacy.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. So there was a church near a sex shop, like across the street or something
Yeah.
like that, and the church was finding, like on Sunday mornings, condom wrappers and like needles and whatnot. So they couldn't like make the shop close down or nothing like that.
Right.
So what they did was take pictures of license plates of the customers that would go to the shop.
Yeah.
And would mail them pictures in their house.
Do you remember what the postcard said?
It said something like, don't know if you knew there was a church in the area.
Yeah. And then we began to talk about this, and I had asked you the question, and I had asked, because let's be honest, I know this is a little bit of a generalization, but it does seem like guys go to the sex shops maybe a little bit more than the females. With that being said, if your man had a picture of his car sent to your residence, is this going to go over well? No. And the logic was, if we send these to your house and you know that people know that you're going, A, you're going to be less likely to go. Maybe your spouse or significant other is going to put pressure on you at that point not to let you go. And in other words, they were kind of trying to draw the sex shops or drive them out of business. They did go to them and they said, hey, can you clean this up? Hey, can you help us out? And they really weren't doing anything. And you're right, they were finding the used condoms. They were finding the wrappers. They were finding pictures of pee-pees and wee-wees. They were finding drug paraphernalia out there. And I got to be honest, if I'm a churchgoer and I see that kind of stuff in the parking lot, I'm not going to want to go to that. I'm not going to want my kids to be around that. So they decided to attack the sex shops. What was the result of all of this? Do you remember?
The court ruled that it was legal because they had access to public information.
In Texas, it's a public record to be able to look up somebody's license plate. So when they took the pictures and then they sent them out, they actually went to a public record, looked up the license plates. They were able to get this information. That's how they mailed it, so they didn't break any laws. The guy, the pastor, and he was somebody that was kind of a bad seed in his previous life. Do you remember what happened to him?
Ran for office.
Did he win?
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly won to be mayor in small town Texas. So take a look at that article, and I think I even posted another article in the links that kind of said a little bit more about it. Who were the Texas cheerleaders? Remember the high school?
Yeah, a group of cheerleaders who, I guess, made banners with their own money that promoted, I guess, their team, but with like biblical scriptures. And
Anybody remember the high school?
somewhere in the south.
Somewhere in the south.
In Texas.
Somewhere in South Texas. Wow, that narrows it down. Texas is a big damn place. Kuntz High School. Kuntz High School cheerleaders. And check the article. You'll be able to get the spelling there. But these cheerleaders, it's kind of pretty much exactly what you had said. These cheerleaders wanted to demonstrate their spirituality, for lack of a better word. So they created these ginormous banners that the team would run through just prior to the game, and they would put biblical scriptures up there. These things might actually only be unfurled for, 10, 15, 20 seconds, and then, of course, as soon as the team ran through them, they'd be disposed of. But this was a public high school at a public game, and in fact, there were really big crowds there because it's football in Texas. Now, who got involved that complained?
Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Freedom from Religion Foundation. Was this a Texas group?
No.
No.
Do you remember where they're from?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah, it was. This group from Wisconsin came down and they basically said, you are establishing religion. You're posting these Christian verses. And as such, if you're only posting Christian verses at a public school game, on school grounds, in school uniforms, this is the school really pushing religion. What did the cheerleaders argue?
Freedom of expression.
They didn't argue freedom of religion, they argued freedom of speech. And what was the speech argument? What were they basically saying?
The biblical speech.
Say what?
The biblical speech.
So it is religious.
No.
Well, that they bought it with their own money.
We bought it with our own money, we made it on our own time, we did it of our own free will, we're just exercising our freedom of speech, and in fact, we should be allowed to do this. What'd the court say? Court said it was legal. And in fact, if you remember, Facebook, I think, said that they were overwhelmingly liked by tens of thousands of people, in fact. And in Texas, people really don't like the idea of outsiders coming down anyway. Even Texas Governor Rick Perry came out and said that this should be legal and they should allow the girls to do this. And do you remember what happened after the court case? Did this take off?
Yeah, other schools started doing it.
Other schools started doing it too. I think it's still kind of under appeal, although it really looks like this is going to hold. I never looked up if the team won a lot of games or whatnot, but they were saying that they were just trying to support their team. And if you remember, we had talked about the idea of maybe if other religions wanted to put up banners or different things like this. And when we were talking about that idea of these other banners, nobody was technically stopping them, but we mentioned that this down in Texas might be one exception, maybe accepted down there because everybody believes kind of the same way. If you tried to do something like that up here, it probably wouldn't work as well. Chapter 2, and just looking at the terms, is there anything that jumps out from chapter 2 that y'all want to talk about?
What is the ERA stand for?
ERA, what was ERA?
Equal rights.
Equal Rights Amendment. Do you remember anything else about Equal Rights Amendment?
Oh, it got over.
Oh yeah, it got overruled by, wasn't it like a woman's thing? Like say they sent out a bunch of things like saying like we already have these privileges, like why do you want to bring us down?
Well, it never passed.
It never
It
passed.
was the Equal Rights Amendment was a proposed constitutional amendment, and the idea was that this was going to prohibit discrimination on account of sex or on account of gender. On account of sex or on account of gender. It never actually passed. And when we were talking about this, do you remember we were talking about interpreting the Constitution? Do you remember what example of interpreting the Constitution this was?
Property?
Not property. We talked about different ways to interpret the Constitution, and I had mentioned to you that ERA was an example of
Original intent?
Original intent. What was the original intent when they passed the Equal Rights Amendment? Do you remember?
That you interpreted the way that you interpret the Constitution the way it was written.
You interpret the original intent says that you interpret the Constitution with the original intent of the framers or the original intent of the people that wrote it. What was their intent when they wrote ERA? Do you remember?
Discrimination ended.
And what kind of discrimination?
Wasn't it like hours?
So like economic.
Economic discrimination, talking about economic opportunity or pay raises, pay rates, this kind of a thing. Well, if you'll recall when we read this off, I began to talk to you about women serving on the front line or same-sex marriage. And then all of a sudden, technically, looking at the words of ERA, had this been passed, gay marriage might have actually been legalized much, much earlier than it was. But that wasn't what the original intent of the framers. They weren't writing this to put women on the front line. They weren't writing this, in fact, to protect gay marriage. They were writing this to equalize economic opportunities. So if you looked at the original intent, the meaning of this would be very different than if you just looked at the meaning of the words. Does anybody remember stare decisis?
That precedent has, precedent is important in the litigation system, and he gave the example of Roe v. Wade because it's been legal for so many years, you can't overturn it.
Oh, you said the precedent. I was thinking you said the president. And I was like, what is she talking about? The precedent of cases. Yeah. The idea is that when the Supreme Court issues a decision, future courts, under the term stare decisis, are supposed to respect and apply that earlier decision to future cases that would be similar. Stare decisis. Now, with this in mind, I gave you the example of abortion, and I had mentioned to you that there are people that have been trying for decades to get abortion overturned. Maybe appoint a majority to the Supreme Court, maybe amend the Constitution, but the longer that a case remains valid law, the less likely it's ever going to be overturned. And I had asked you all about planting trees. Do you remember that? Could you pull a tree out of the ground in a week, in a month, in a year? What about 10 years? And the answer was maybe yeah, maybe no, I couldn't get it then. Well, that's been in the ground for over 40 years. Roe versus Wade isn't going anywhere. Do you remember the case that I had given you that only lasted a year?
Obamacare?
Wasn't Obamacare. There was a case that I'd given you that only lasted a year, and the Supreme Court pulled that tree out of the ground. Nicholas?
That was the abortion one for Nebraska or whatever it was.
The abortion one for Nebraska. I don't remember that one. It was one that got Jackie mad.
Oh, it was Oklahoma.
Jackie, did you get mad on Friday?
We don't have class on Fridays.
Wednesday, did you get mad? I don't remember you getting mad on Wednesday. Jackie got mad because she knows somebody.
Oh, that wasn't me and Jason yelled at each other at.
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with Jackie. So I'm asking you, when did Jackie get mad?
She got mad because we had to show the thing.
No, that was Wednesday.
The thing?
The sonogram.
Show the sonogram.
That was Wednesday. Yeah, me and...
There was something else that she got mad about, which was the case that was only 1 year. That Oklahoma case was like 3 years.
Oh, okay.
And it's not in Chapter 2. It's in Chapter 3. So here's the question. What was the group? You said, I know somebody. I think you're wrong. Jehovah's Witnesses. What was the Jehovah's Witnesses about?
Those crazy people.
Oh, they didn't want to stand up.
Be careful, she's going to get mad.
For the pledge.
They didn't want to pledge allegiance.
They didn't want to pledge allegiance
to the flag.
to the flag. Can you
Yeah.
explain it to me? What was the logic?
Well, because they don't consider, I guess.
Oh, they don't consider earthly groups, so they don't want to stand and honor the government.
Earthly bodies.
Earthly bodies.
Yeah, earthly bodies is basically what we're talking about. So if you're pledging allegiance to a flag, that's kind of an earthly body. If you're pledging allegiance to a government, that's an earthly body. And they don't typically do that. Now with this in mind, these little kids were in West Virginia, and this was in the middle of the Cold War. And basically, schools kind of felt like they had a responsibility, a duty even, to kind of build patriotic values, to build respect for the flag, nationalism, these kinds of things. And these little kids said, listen, this contradicts with our religious values. Did the kids have to stand?
Yeah.
Yes.
The school immediately suspended them, and they said, you know what, this is not a religious case at all. The school said when they suspended them, this is about patriotism, this is about citizenship, this is about respect for the flag. These are just good American values. The kids said, you're violating our First Amendment rights to our freedom to exercise our religion. And what did the court hold?
They stand with the school.
They did. They said this was not a religious ceremony. They said